everybody, this is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today, we're talking with Jay Stiles, number one Amazon best-selling business book writing and self-publishing coach, and founder of Aspiring Authors for Change, a platform that enables people to use the craft of persuasive writing to build their brands, generate leads, and grow their businesses. I'm personally super excited about this because I know a lot of people would love to write a book, but it seems so overwhelming. So we all love some tips and shortcuts. So with that, welcome Jay, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Brett. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited about this. So I have a lot of questions that I want to ask you, but I want to start off a little bit with your background. Can you just give me a sense of how did you get started in writing books in the first place? Like what was your background? What led you to that point?
So it was actually unexpected. So my background falls in entertainment. So I'm a writer by trade, and I produce documentaries. And the first documentary that I put out, it was around COVID. Actually, it was on 2020 of COVID, and I had the first screening for it, and then my second screening was canceled due to the stay-at-home mandates. So that really got, pretty much like blew off steam for the promotion and marketing of my documentary. So I knew I need to find a way to pivot in the marketing because when you produce documentaries, you really get it out there with your the screenings. And so I didn't have any more screenings because all they were canceled. And so after 2 months, I came across an article and it was talking about how book sales were surging through the stay-at-home pandemic. And I was like, you know what? I said, maybe if I take the documentary's message and transform that into a book, while people are at home, they can actually read the book and I can kind of market the documentary behind the book. And so that's exactly pretty much what I did. I took the message and then I crafted a well book, the book you see behind me here, Become Inspired. And, I, marketed and it did really well, and people were really inspired by the book, which forced them to actually go and watch the documentary on Amazon. So it was like a sales funnel for my documentary, and so it was very intriguing how this situation worked, and this led me to actually helping other people because I was getting so many messages on how they were inspired by the documentary, but also too, there was like, Jay, I've been trying to write a book for years, man. How did you finally, write the book? So after I got tons of messages, I was like, you know what? I think I should turn this into a business. And that's the story. And I pretty much started helping people, write their books. And then I transitioned more specifically into helping entrepreneurs write books to grow their business.
It's awesome. I love the fact that, what you did there was you took a problem, right? Because you were in a situation where basically your ability to market what you were doing was shut off. And you found an
Right.
opportunity there. You looked for another way to do it, and ultimately it ended up being something that was in some ways probably a blessing in disguise because you were able to find this whole other avenue to get this
Right.
exposure and
Right.
learn a whole new way to get the message out. I think that's awesome and a testament to your adaptability, resilience, and all that kind of stuff too. So that's really fascinating. What a great beginning that you had there. So you chose to write the book. There were other options. You could have gone with social media. You could have started a podcast. What was it specifically about the book that you thought? Obviously, you saw that the stats said that they were surging. But was there anything else about a book in particular that made you think this is the right way to go about it?
That's a very good question. Yeah, because I could have went the social media route and I could have went the podcasting route. And I think at the time, I think podcasting really got its boom, in my opinion, and during the pandemic. That's really, really, really boomed because no one had anything to do, and they were trying to find other ways to basically market their different business and products. And it really boomed during the COVID area. So the reason I chose the book was because I felt like I felt like social media is a it's a pretty it's not an easy way to market, but it's a low barrier to entry. Anyone can pretty much make social media posts. So I feel like anytime there's the barrier to entry is low to entry, it doesn't require a lot to do. I feel like it really takes away the value or decreases the value of the marketing, in my opinion. And just like you mentioned before we got on, you said, everyone wants to write a book. And everyone can write a book, but the thing is, they won't write the book because they won't put in the time and the commitment to actually do it. And so when you actually, put together a book, people look at you differently because they're like, oh man, he has a book, she has a book. They take you a little bit more seriously because back in their minds, they probably want to write a book and they haven't done it yet. So the fact that you put all your expertise in the book, it just levels your perceived value. Your perceived value. It kind of it raises that to a level where people are saying, I think he's serious about what he's talking about, his expertise. So let me see what he's talking about. Let me grab his book. Let me buy his product because he wrote a book. So he obviously must knows something because he wrote a book. So it's the perceived value behind writing a book, and so that's why I actually did it. I just felt like, other than the article, it definitely stated that book sales were surging, but I felt that was the best marketing tool at the time because everyone's on social media, and all your content, it really gets lost in the sea of all the other content that's out there because it's low barrier to entry to actually make content. I mean, it's great for marketing and promotion, but when it comes down to actually having people choose you, the one who has a book, and beside the one who actually don't have no book but just actually marketing on social media, I think people will go with the one who has a book if you're selling a product or you're selling your services, because they figure the perceived value is higher. He has a book, so he knows more what he's talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, not only is it low barrier to entry, there's tons of competition, and it's so disposable, right? It's a scrolling medium. So you could have the
Right.
best post in the world, you could have the best idea, but 30 seconds after you post it, it's gone already. So you have to keep that going over and over and over again. So you don't get the longevity that you get out of the ability to publish something where now it's permanent, right? I mean, at least in a sense, your book is you write it, you publish it, and then it's still there. Whether or not you're selling a lot of copies is another issue, but the fact of the matter is, it's still there, and you can always hold it up, and it shows that instant credibility. So, yeah, I'm with you there. I find it fascinating, actually, because when I think about authors, also my own perception, if I think about, oh, somebody's got X number of followers on social media, or somebody's written a book, there's something about the gravity of writing a book that it does. It feels a little bit more professional, a little bit higher end. And so there's something about it I can totally see where, from a perception standpoint, it would impact that and make people take you more seriously. So that's super cool. So what do you think the biggest, for all the people that you help write books and everything, what do you think the biggest misconceptions you think people have about writing a book? Because I've talked to a lot of people who would want to, and everybody's got their own ideas. Until you've done it, you don't really know. So what do you think what mistakes do you think people make about their thinking about writing a book?
That's a great question. The biggest mistake that people, or the biggest misconception that people think when writing a book is you have to be like a professional writer. You got to be a great writer. You have to have excellent vocabulary. You have to speak, excellently to actually write a book. And that's not necessarily true because people, when you write a book, you're writing a version of yourself and how you speak and how you communicate. So, what I tell my students is that, you're not trying to sell someone else when you write a book. You're trying to be who you are and share your expertise because people respect you for who you are and what you know and your expertise. So, the way you communicate, the way you speak, you want to speak the same way in your book. Now, you definitely want to have proper grammar. But just like different like slangs or sayings that you may say when you're actually speaking with someone. That's okay to put that in there, but you want to speak how you actually talk. And people feel like, I can't write. I'm not a good writer. You don't have to be a good writer. All you have to do is share your expertise and what you know, and people respect you behind that. Because they're not really grading you on your grammar. They're grading you on what you know and how you can help transform their lives. So that's a very great question, because I get that a lot. People come to me and say, Jay, I don't know how to write, man. Yeah, and it's not knowing how to write. Do you have expertise, and can you structure that into a well crafted book? That's the goal for that.
Yeah, I love the message there because I really believe I'm a huge believer in authenticity. I think that we've gotten to a point now especially in the digital space, where it's not hard to make content anymore. It's not hard. Like, there's so many people online, and we've gotten to a level of, when it started, everything was very amateurish. And then the first barrier was everybody tried to get more and more professional, more polished, more this, more. So everything got overly curated to a point now where
Yeah.
it's so phony that it might look beautiful, but you look at it, you're like, you can't relate to it because it doesn't seem real. And I think we've
Right.
crossed over that now. And people more have a thirst for authenticity. They want to know what your voice is. They don't want to know what somebody else would write about how your voice would be, or somebody else to take what you would say and rework it in a way. They want to know what you'd say, how you'd say it, and how you think and feel. And I
Exactly.
100% agree with that. I think authenticity is super important, um, in any kind of medium or any kind of content that we're trying to create. Um, so how does authoring a book help a coaching brand stand out in a crowded market? Because I know that obviously the coaching space, a lot of people want to be coaches. Just more people want to be coaches even than probably they want to write books. But the thing is, there's a lot of coaches, and I don't know how you pick and choose between them. You don't know who's good always, right? So how does a book help us in that particular regard?
Instant credibility. Instant credibility, because like I mentioned before, the perceived value is high when someone writes a book. If just say if you marketing, if you were selling a service, you and someone else selling the same service or same product, and you have a book or they have a book and you don't, you know, most likely people will actually go with the one who has a book because of the perceived value. Even though you may be great on social media, you may have, tons of followers, but more than likely, people assume those followers are not real, because you have more people actually thinking that people buy their followers. So again, you can't. It's hard to fake a book. You can't fake write a book. It's a tangible product. So when you actually put one out, it's just instant credibility. And not only that, too, with getting instant credibility, then you have increased visibility, because more people want to talk to you, more people want to invite you on their podcast, more people want to invite you or write an article about you. So all that stuff increases your visibility, and more invisibility, visibility increases your revenue, because people want to hire you to go speak at an event. They want to, buy your services that you're selling. So all that plays a role, but it starts with actually writing a book and building that instant credibility, because people assume, even though you probably may play it off and you don't know what you're talking about, but people assume that you know what you're talking about because you took the time and the dedication and the commitment to actually go through the process and write a book, something that they've been wanting to do for a while, and you just impressed them because you did it for yourself.
Well, that's the thing. At a minimum, even if your book is full of BS, it's still a lot of work, right? You still put all that
Exactly.
stuff in there. You did the follow through, and so I think people are envious just of the idea that, hey, you did it, and I wanted to, but I've been talking about doing that, but it's on so many people's bucket list, but I don't know how many people actually get to it. Yeah, I think that's really true, and I love the piece that you said about the credibility, because I think that what's super important is nowadays when we see somebody and we're considering doing business with them, generally what happens is, I think it's something like 72% of people or whatever will go online and try to look you up. So you're right, if you have a social media account, there's followers, that's fine, but that can be manipulated, it can be faked. When they see a book
Right.
pop up next to your name, and they click on it, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, this is a published book. Instant credibility, because now they've been able to find you, and there's something about that makes you seem more real and tangible, and your
Right.
advice to seem more credible. And so I 100% think that is, that holds weight, and is a great reason for it. So, in terms of writing the book itself, do you see mistakes that people make in that process? If I decide that, I've got this idea for a book, and so I'm going to make an outline and I'm going to start writing my book or whatever, through that process itself, are there mistakes or problems or challenges you see people have with that?
Yes, I think one of the biggest challenges is writing a book just to actually write one, but having no clear structure or no type of structure on how you like you just writing a book just to get it out there. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see people do. And so when you write a book, you got to think of your book as a sales funnel. And it's the top of your sales funnel that you're building awareness to a problem. And another thing too is that I see people do is when they write books, they don't actually write a book to solve a problem. So if you want to write a book, especially nonfiction, if you're going to write a book, the only way people will actually buy your book, other than your family and your friends, you have to be solving some type of problem, because people are looking for transformation. I'm a big fan of nonfiction books. I'm not really a fan of fiction books. I never buy fiction books, but I have a bookshelf here, and I got a lot of nonfiction books because I'm actually trying to transform my life in some type of way. So the first thing that I do if I'm trying to transform my life, I head straight to Amazon and I type in, how to buy my first property. I'm going to look for a book that's going to actually give me step by step solving my problem on how I'm going to buy my property. So you want to, get a clear structure of your business and understand that the book is the top of your sales funnel, and you're leading people down, to actually book calls. Okay, because you have in the sales funnel you have 4 steps. You have your awareness, you have your interest, you have your decision, and then you have your action. And then, so like in my the book that I released, my ebook is strictly a sales funnel to book people on calls to actually, sell my services to them. And if you're not doing that, then you just actually wasted your time with writing a book. Because writing a book, it takes time to do. So, to answer your question, you definitely want to make sure that you have a problem that you're solving. And then you definitely just want to think about your business and how it's structured and how can you lead people, from your book, from the awareness stage of making them aware of their problem and leading them back to your product and services.
I think that's so smart, because one of the things that I think people do, and not just with books, but I see this with social media too, is they're doing it for the purpose of attention. So it's about them, not about their audience. It's not about giving value. It's about, hey, look at me and and people are only going to care about you, your background, all these other things if you could solve a problem for them, or there's something about you that fascinates them. So the reason that we want to read Steve Jobs' biography is because of what he was able to accomplish. It's not because,
Right.
hey, this guy down the street named Steve Jobs seems really interesting. I think I'm going to go ask him about his background. No, nobody cares. But if you've accomplished something, if you've done something, or if on a more personal level you're able to solve a problem for somebody, then all of a sudden they want to know more about you. They want to know. I was at a marketing conference years ago, and I don't remember if it was Jay Abraham, but one of the like marketing guru guys of the old school, even before the online days, he had said, there's this concept called wanting to touch the hem. And the idea was that when you find somebody that is so good at solving a problem that you feel understood by them, you want to naturally be closer to them. You want to know more about them. You want to learn. So you'll pay money to go to lunch with them. You'll pay money to go to their conferences. You'll buy their products. Anything to get more of them because of something they were able to do for you. And I think
Yep.
that that's a really important point, people get it in reverse. They're like, I want to be so interesting. Let me just tell you about all the stuff that I can do and who I am and everything. And it's like nobody cares unless you give them a reason to care. And that's by solving that problem. So I think starting off with that in the back of your mind, what kind of problem can I solve? What kind of itch can I scratch here with this? Where people are going to say, "Wow, he gets me. He understands what I need and how to help me solve my problem." Then they're going to want to know everything else about you. So I think it's a really, really good point. And I think coming from the right perspective when we start the journey to do it matters a lot. Otherwise, it also probably that leads to problems with structure. Because if you're not trying to solve something and you're just talking about yourself or your life or whatever else, it's just going to be meandering and going all over the place. If there's something that you're doing, there's going to be a process to it. There's going to be a flow, a problem, agitate, solve, whatever the case may be. And that process in and of itself will make the book flow in a way that is valuable and useful to people. So,
Absolutely.
cool. That's cool, man. I like that. So, what about writing the book itself? Should we, forgive me if you're going to crucify me for this, but what about ghostwriters? You know what I mean? There's a lot of people that are like, okay, I want to write a book. The easy way to do this is to outsource it. It's to go give it to somebody else, have them write it, and put my name on it. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a good idea? Is it a bad idea? What are the pros and cons?
Hey, I mean, you know what? Your preference is your preference. If the very first book I tried to write was in 2010, and I tried to actually get a ghostwriter. Actually, I paid a ghostwriter maybe like $700, and the book still never manifested. And it was really because at the time, what you just said, I was actually trying to just write a book just to write a book. I didn't have a real problem. I wasn't really focused. I was just trying to write a book just to write a book. I wasn't following up with the ghostwriter, so the book just never manifested. And I feel like if you feel like you want a ghostwriter, that's totally your preference. I feel like you get more joy out of writing your own book. I feel like you building confidence because to go through the process of writing a book, there's so many steps. But just the writing process alone, man, is so therapeutic, man, because you are really taking your business. If you're writing a book in regards to solving a problem for someone, you're writing, for your business, but it's really helping you clarify and get clear on your business and set up your sales funnel. But it's so therapeutic too because you are, basically looking in hindsight to what you can do better in your business. So it helps you on so many levels as far as in your business. If you're confused about, different things in your business or how you should run your business, when you actually sit down and think about how you should lay this book out, it's going to actually, make you're going to actually get clear in your business pretty much. How now, and I get a lot of people too that say they don't have time to write a book. I get it, but I tell people too that if you always will have time for the things that you want to have time for. And my method is the 2-5-500 method. So if you want to write a book, all you got to do is follow this 2-5-500 method. So 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, of a minimum of writing 500 words. If you do that for 1 week, that's going to be 2,500 words. So that's enough for an ebook. You do that for 2 weeks, that's going to be 5,000 words. You do that for, I believe, 12 weeks, that's going to be 40,000 words. And that's enough for a book. So it's breaking down really small goals for yourself and building that confidence to accomplish the next goal and the next goal and the next goal. And that's all it is with writing a book, is really taking this big goal and then just really minimizing it, making it small, and then just building on that. But anyone can write a book. You don't have to get a ghostwriter if you feel like you can't write a book. You don't have to get a ghostwriter if you feel like you're too busy. If you really take that method that I told you, like 2-5-500, you can really write a book in no time. And you can still write it. Like I said, you can write an ebook. You can write a nice ebook. I helped a client write a nice ebook in 2021. She is still getting leads to this day. She probably closed maybe 65% of all of her leads. She probably get maybe 20 leads a week from her ebook now, and it leads to booking calls. And then she, on the call, she sell her services. So again, like I mentioned before, writing a book, whether it's an ebook or either just a book, a hardback or a paperback, it's a lifetime of clients that's actually going to roll in and, add revenue, to your business. But just to go back to your question, it's your preference on if you want to have a ghostwriter or you want to write your book yourself. But I recommend that you take the time and do it yourself, because I'm telling you, you're gonna build so much confidence in who you are, and it's gonna push you to do even more things because you thought you couldn't even write this book. That's what it did to me. That's what it did to a lot of my clients. They were like, Jay, I came in, I didn't think I was gonna write this book. Same, the same situation. And so it's a very great testament, man. And the most accomplished thing as me as a coach, when I see clients come in as someone else, and then when I see clients come in as one thing but they leave as someone else, that's like the biggest testament that I have, over just getting leads for their business. Is who they become, the best version of themselves.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. There's so many good things. First off, I have to say, I'm with you 100%. I had to ask the question because I know a lot of people think about ghostwriting, but I believe the process we go through with a lot of the stuff in our lives is really where the value is. It's not the end result. And if we don't go through the process, if we don't, take the pain, right, and still work through it, then we don't get the same level of benefit because we didn't do it. So, I do believe that first off, that's super important. I also think that through the process, you mentioned something else, your relationship with the information changes, because when you are living something and you're doing it, you have one like experience with that. When you have to step back from it and explain it to somebody else, all of a sudden your relationship with everything changes. You have to clarify things. You have to think of things in ways that you can communicate them. And that clarity is really great for your own critical thinking. And I also think coming from a place of passion, right, which is really what this is all about to begin with. If the goal of the book, right, everybody knows that there's financial benefits and all that other stuff. But like anything else, and I found this, by the way, with the podcast, so I'll draw the parallel. With the podcast, people say to me all the time, well, aren't you worried, like the AI podcast? I'm not worried, because the fact of the matter is, first of all, an AI podcast is not going to have my experience, my background. It's not going to be able to talk to people about their experience and background. Can it ask good questions? Can it do it? Sure it can. Can it craft it? But it's all superficial because there's no real experience behind it. And the fact of the matter is, if the goal is only to make money, you're doing it for the wrong reason in the first place. If the goal is to have that transformation that you talked about and help create that in other people, that's where that passion comes from, and that's where that drive, the motivation, and the finding the time you don't have to do it, you will. Because if something really matters to you, like you said, you'll find time. You might not be able to do it as fast as you want. You might only have an hour a day or 2 hours a day when you'd rather work on it for 6 hours, but you'll find time and you'll make it happen if it matters that much to you. And so I think coming from a place of passion and doing it yourself really does matter, because I do think there's an evolution that takes place with that, the same way it did for me, with the podcast. And I did it out of the desire to want to have people like you come on the show and have conversations with you, because where else are you going to be able to do that in this kind of context where you can have a great conversation with somebody for a half an hour, right? And talk in depth about all these various things. And I think writing a book has a lot of parallels in the same way that if we take the time to go through it, put our own passion into it, we're also going to get better at it throughout the process. So every book we write thereafter is going to get easier and better and all that other stuff too. So, yeah, there was so much in there that I wanted to comment on all of it, because I I think you said a lot of really important things there. So
And and and,
can you
and just one thing,
go ahead?
I just want to touch on this, Brett. One thing, and you said a key thing to newsflash too. A book is not going to make you rich. Okay, it's everything that comes after a book that adds revenue to you, that adds credibility to you. So you have your book, and then your book is like the first domino. And then when you write your book, that domino falls, and then boom, instant credibility, boom, more visibility, boom, you're on podcast, boom, people ask you to speak. So it's like it's a domino effect to other things that's going to be it's a byproduct of other things that are going to transpire in your life and to actually cash in on other opportunities that will be actually happening as well. But the book alone is not going to make you rich. It's what comes from the book, the byproduct of the book.
Yeah, and as you mentioned before, so one of your clients is still getting leads years later from an ebook. So you have that sort of ever presence of it, and that permanence I think is really valuable, because the other thing about that that's sort of hidden a little bit, and a little sneaky, is the fact that, okay, so let's say that you have a YouTube channel, or let's say that you have a TikTok account or whatever else. Those platforms could get shut down. They could shut you down. If you write a book, Amazon might stop selling it, but the book is still there. The book is still published. So you have that level of permanence also, which I think there's a lot of value in that, because it's one of the reasons, to be honest, also I went with podcasts as my primary thing. I mean, I love the medium of talking to people, but the main reason that for me it was a higher form of anything than pure social media is the fact that, you know, it's platform independent. If I have a good show and people want to listen to it, you could shut down a provider, you could shut down a platform. It doesn't matter. I can just move, right? You can't bring your followers with you as easily. If you're trying to go from one platform to another, there's a reason. Most people, I mean, if you're a celebrity, it doesn't really count because that's different. But for a normal
Right.
person, if you have a bunch of followers on one platform, you can still get more on the other platform easier. But not everybody works on all the platforms the same. So if something happens to you, I know people that have had accounts that have just gotten shut down and they didn't know that they did anything wrong. And so, boom, you're out of business, and I think you got the book, it's published, it's always published. And so, it's something you can always hang on to and always have there. So I think that's another really important point that might sometimes get lost in the weeds. But um, so what about publishing versus writing? How can we get a book published? Let's say, okay, we do your method, we create all the content that we need, so we think we've got what we need for a book. First off, I would ask, would you give it to an editor first to get it edited? And second off, how do you actually go about publishing it?
Good question. So the very first thing that you do when you finish writing your book, well, you're going to edit your own writing first. Before you pass it off to an editor, you want to make sure that you take everything out that you don't want in there. You're going to actually go in and fix your own grammar. So you're going to do a self edit first. And then when you feel like you have taken everything out that you want out and put everything in that you want in, then you want to pass it off to an editor. And you want to let your editor go in and edit your book. I know a lot of well, I don't know a lot of people, but I know a lot of people talk about using Grammarly to edit. I wouldn't necessarily. Actually, I had a client who did that, and she found out too that Grammarly, using Grammarly, it's computerized. It's not having a real person go in. So Grammarly missed a lot of things. And then too, just having a professional editor go in, it just sounds better because they change. They change a different way. How can I say this? They basically not change the language, but they make it flow better. Because it's not about just grammar, but it's about the flow of your book and how it reads. As a reader is actually reading it. So you definitely go through the editing stage, and then from the editing stage, you're going to get your book cover design, your interior design. That's the layout inside of your book. You get that done as well, and then when you finish that, then you actually create your KDP account, which is Amazon. So you want to create your Amazon account to upload your manuscript and your book cover. And then you want to create an Ingram Spark account, which is your distributor. So Ingram Spark is pretty much if you want to get your book into like bookstores, the first question they're going to ask you is who's your distributor. And Ingram Spark is the biggest distributor out there. So they're going to ask you who's your distributor. If you say Amazon, they're going to say they're going to actually instantly know that you're self-published. But if you say Ingram Spark, then they'll think that you are with a major publishing company. So what I tell, like my saying is that just because your book is self-published, it doesn't have to look self-published. So it's really going in and hiring professional editors, professional book cover designers, and doing things, taking the proper steps and giving yourself time and not rushing, but actually putting out a well quality book. The most comments that I get about my book from clients when they say they work with me, they say, Jay, the reason that I chose you over someone else because your book is so professional. I remember when you released your book and I bought your book, but everything was just so professional. Your book cover, your interior layout, and so people actually see that. I remember I read a book, and it wasn't a bad book. I read a book, and it was on real estate, and he had so many grammatical errors in that book. I couldn't believe it. But I think I'm not sure how many sales he made on that book, but it's not a bad book. But he's giving great information, but he didn't have a professional editor. He probably used like Grammarly, but that really takes away from the time that you put into your book, because then it's like people think it's that's your representation. Your book is your representation of you and your business. So when people see stuff like that, then they feel like your business is maybe unstructured or not organized, or so it's a representation of who you are, who your business is. So it's important for you to really take the time and invest in some good editors, invest in some book cover designers, some tier designers, and put out a great product.
That's a really good point. The representation point. It's easy to overlook that, but if
Yep.
that's people's first impression of you, that's what it is. And if it's sloppy, they're going to think you're sloppy. They're going to think your business is sloppy. They're going to think that that's what to expect from you, even if it's totally the opposite. So it's really important. I don't know if you've ever seen this book, but I'm gonna give you a book that I read that it blew my mind, because it's a book about editing, and it's called On Writing Well, and it's written by William Zinsser. And I read it in college, and it always stood out to me. And the reason it stood out is because for the first time I was able to see the power of what a good editor can do. He wrote this book, and you read the first number of chapters, and it's actually pretty engaging for being a book about writing, which I wasn't all that interested in reading, but whatever. I get through a few of the chapters, and then what he does is he gives you a chapter that he wrote, and then he gives you the edited version. So you could see all the line outs. And as good as the book was, the difference between those two chapters was astounding, because
Yep.
the editor is able to go in there and they don't change, like you said, they're not changing what you're saying. They're making it clearer, more concise, succinct, so it flows perfectly. There's no wasted, words, and so it was so tight, the edited version. And his original version wasn't bad, but it was so much bigger. I couldn't believe the difference that, having a professional editor made. So On Writing Well, William Zinsser, it's a fantastic book about self-editing, or at least the power of editing. So, yeah, to your point there, 100%. I think being professional matters. So how long, just give us an idea. I get that this is going to vary, but let's just say on a spectrum, how long would it take from start to finish to write and publish on average? Is there a range?
There is. So I feel like it takes 10 to 12 months to actually put together a well crafted book. 10 to 12 months. I did mine in 12. I have clients that did it in 10 and 11 months, because again, there's so many steps, and the writing phase is the most extensive, because you're going to be writing your book for maybe 12 to 14 weeks. So that's the most extensive part. And then everything after that is the editing. So there's time with the edits. You got to get it over to the editors. like 2 weeks there, 2 weeks there, your book cover designer, and in between, you're really just actually taking taking your time and just making sure when you get things back, like your book cover design, that you got something that you actually want. You got your edits back, and you're going through your edits and actually making sure that you're looking over basically your proofreader just to make sure you're reading things, just to make sure that they didn't leave anything out. So all that stuff takes time, and if someone, I know a lot of people sell too. A lot of other coaches may sell like, hey, you can get your, you can write your book and publish your book in 90 days. I don't teach that because that's something that I haven't did for myself, and I just know by experience that it really took time. It takes time to write that book behind me. Even with my ebook. Now, if you want to talk about an ebook, now you can really do an ebook, in less time. But even the ebook that I did, I think the ebook that I put out, Lead Sales, Profits, and Growth: How Writing a Book Can Help Grow Your Small Business, that really took me 90 days. Because again, I take my time. I'm a perfectionist, and I hate to say that because it has a bad connotation. You kind of put things out when you feel like it's ready, but I love to put out the best type of product, and make sure that I give my audience the best. But with my ebook, I did it in like 90 days, or it probably maybe less than 90 days or whatever. So, but just to answer your question, if you're going to put out a paperback or a hardback, because you got to go through all those phases and get it up on Amazon and get it through your distributor, and then give it out to editors, you got to give time for that. So, and then you got to market. You got to come up with some type of marketing strategy. So again, that takes about 10 to 12 months. If you do it less than 10 to 12 months, I can probably say that it's probably not going to be a high quality book. Just to be honest.
All right. Oh, that's awesome. That's what we're looking for. All right. So
Yeah.
where can people find you, find your products, find your services, connect with you?
Yeah, so you can actually find me on Instagram and social media at JAY Styles TV. And then you can actually download to my free ebook, Lead Sales, Profits, and Growth: How Writing a Book Can Help Grow Your Small Business. So it pretty much explains what a book can do for your business. And I explain the sales funnel and how you can use a book to draw in people to your services and products. So I just kind of talk about that. And I have an audiobook on that ebook as well if you feel like you want to drive and listen to it. So just go to the website, Lead Sales, Profits, and Growth.com. And then you can just download that for free. And then you can download too the ebook, as well as I'm gonna give you a free mini course on putting together your ebook as well. So download that as well.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So one last question I always have to ask because I think it's important and I love to hear what everyone's going to say. And that is, what's your number one tip for success as a business owner or entrepreneur?
Oh man, perseverance, perseverance. Being an entrepreneur, man, is it's not for the lighthearted. It's work, but it's rewarding. But you're going to be having problems probably every day, and having to figure things out. But I think it makes you a better person. It grows you, and but it's one of the most rewarding experiences for me because I've seen myself had to grow a lot because I had to kind of figure out this route that I was taking, and not really having all the answers for the questions that I had, but kind of had to go through that journey and figure it out on my own. And that's why they say there is no like winning formula to becoming successful. It's really just going through your own journey. But the key is perseverance and going through that. And you may need a day to kind of like sit back and just rest, but never quit. And I think that's the main thing, man. So always stand on your journey, and always just persevering.
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. Look, we're professional problem solvers, aren't we? I mean, that's what being an entrepreneur is all about. So that's awesome. Well, with that, it's about
Yes,
time to
sir.
wrap things up. I want to thank you so much, Jay, for sharing all your insights and great tips with us. Visit leads, sales, profits, and growth.com for a free PDF digital copy of his best-selling ebook, which explains the enormous value that a book can add not only to your business but also your brand, and how to use a book to generate multiple revenue streams and incorporate it into your sales funnel. Thanks a lot for tuning in, everybody, and always remember, no matter what you want from your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.